My name is Nancy Farrow, also known as Mama Lou, and I'm the founder of Epic Experience. Epic Experience mission is to empower adult cancer survivors and thrivers to live beyond cancer. I hope that as you listen to Campfires of Hope, Living Beyond Cancer, you find hope, healing, and empowerment. Through stories and education, we aim to guide those impacted by cancer, and more importantly, offer love and support to anyone out there who needs it. This is Beyond Cancer.
Father times dance through the night with the ghosts of America's mind. Well, he's still on our side, the family man's pride, and hopes we will rise once again.
Hello, everyone. This is Gail, aka Sunshine. Today we have Mark Hanson joining us around the campfire. Mark, it is so good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Gail. Definitely, my camp name is Ugaruk.
Please repeat that, Ugaruk.
Ugaruk. I spelled it at camp, and I learned today that I actually spelled it wrong, but it was Uguruk. And it's
okay. Well, then I have to start with this. What does that mean?
It's the Inuit word for bearded seal. I spent about a year and a half up in Nome, Alaska, back in the late 90s at this radio station, and one of the staff members took to calling me that. And when we were on the way up to camp, discussing what our nicknames were going to be for camp, and for me, that was the nickname that won out. So.
Well, perfect. That is great. And those of you, I am actually looking at Mark right now. He does have a beard. I'm not going to say you look like a seal, but you do have a beard. So
thank you. Perfect. I'll take that as a compliment.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. We've learned that already, but where are you from? What kind of work are you in? Anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah. So I'm a native Northwesterner. I live in Seattle currently and grew up in lumber towns out on the Pacific coast, but moved here out of college. My background historically and career is I spent about 20 years in the PR marketing industry, 15 of those in an agency, and then about 5 years freelance, up until roughly the time that I was diagnosed. And I still dabble in it here and there. Now I drive school bus. So that's...
that's exciting.
Well, it can be. Yeah, but it was certainly not a career development, any sort of development that I would have anticipated. But that's a job, right?
Yeah. Now, do you have another fun fact besides the fact that you are a bearded seal?
Well, it is also Nome related. When I was up there, I took part in the polar bear plunge in the Bering Sea.
Oh gosh!
But typically that's a New Year's Day activity that people do. But on New Year's Day, the Bering Sea is frozen over, and so they wait until March or April, and then they'll have a big bonfire on the beach, and you go. And I mean, I was in and out in like 15 seconds.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was.
I'm sorry. Waiting till March does not mean it's balmy. I have a feeling.
No, it was not. So that's my fun fact.
All right. Well, you've already brought up diagnosis, obviously, and how life changed. So tell us a little bit more about your story. When were you diagnosed? What kind of cancer? Treatment, surgery, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it was the springtime of 2020. Obviously, everyone was hunkered down. My wife and I had just signed up for some additional term life insurance, and the nurse came out to, take blood and urine samples and send them off. Yeah, and I figured it was just a formality, right? Yeah, I was like 52 years old, felt really healthy. And then I got a rejection letter a couple weeks later. I'm like, what's the deal? And, I understood hardly a word of it, but it was something about carcinogenic levels of something. And I'm like, whoa.
Wow.
So I contacted a hematologist at my local clinic. That led to talking to someone at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, also known as Fred Hutch.
Mm.
And initially, this is like May, early June-ish. Initially, they thought I had smoldering myeloma, which is a precancerous form of multiple myeloma. And at the time, they were actually had started doing some clinical trials of smoldering myeloma. Usually, they would just like, that person is not showing any symptoms of multiple myeloma, so we're just going to let them go on their happy way, and then if symptoms start showing themselves, then we'll treat them. Well, they were starting to think, well, maybe if we start treating these people as if they had multiple myeloma, like giving them the same chemo regimen, maybe in lower doses, then we can either cure them or kick the can further down the road. So my wife and I um, were looking through that, and at the time, I kind of compare it to you're on the in line for Space Mountain, the ride at Disneyland, and Disney does this really great job of kind of keeping there's this certain tension that's kind of in the air, and so there's that. We're like, this is really interesting. Well, at least I don't have cancer. So anyway, so we were doing some tests, and fast forward to November, I think November 12th was the last test I had to take to determine that whether I would qualify for the clinical trial or not. And it was a PET scan. And it was appropriately enough, it was the next day, Friday the 13th, that I
Oh
got a
gosh.
phone call from my oncologist. And he said, we found a bone lesion on your left pelvis. So, and just like that, it moved my wife and I from the back of that line on Space Mountain to, the precipice of
Hmm.
that first hill when you're like looking down into an inky black void. You're like,
Yeah.
what kind of ride is this going to be? So that was kind of, yeah, so that was fall of 2020.
Wow.
And, so I started chemo in January the
Mm.
following year, 5 months of chemo. And, um, and then I had a bone marrow transplant in July of that year. So we have 3 kids, my wife and I, and so we shuttled them off to, friends, family for 5 weeks so we could move into housing up at Fred Hutch.
Mm.
They're in Seattle proper, and so we would be just minutes away in case there was a complication.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
And how old are your kids? Or how old were they at the time?
at the time, gosh, now you're going to make me do some math. Oh, let's see. That was, I think, our now 18-year-old would have been about 15, 16, I think.
Okay.
And we have a 14-year-old, so she was like 10 or 11. And then our 12-year-old
Wow.
was 9-ish. So, yeah.
So, what was the mental and emotional impact, not only for you, but for your kids? I mean, it's, I think it's one thing to be diagnosed with cancer. That's shocking enough. Now, for 5 weeks, they're not even with you. They're not
Yeah.
even, I mean, that must have been tough.
Yeah. I feel like, maybe I'm in denial to a certain point. I feel like God really protected our family during that time.
Mm.
I grew up in a Christian household, and when I got the diagnosis originally, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like I'm a freelance writer at this point.
Yeah.
I just wrapped up a contract for one of the tech firms here, but what kind of, what's this going to be like? And when I look back on that time, I mean, I think it was amazing that we did as well as we
Mm.
did. And I think we did fairly well. But, so my daughter, my 18-year-old, she's been applying for scholarships and read some of her essays. And she talks a little bit about that
Mm.
time. And, she wants to go into nursing. I don't know to what degree my experience really impacted her, but Yeah, I'm sure it made an indelible an
Yeah.
impression of some sort on my kids. And, we tried to call them every night, but, they were having a good time staying with their friends some, but towards the end, uh, I
Yeah.
kind of tell they were ready to come home.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was, and I think through that, for me personally, I think my faith is stronger because of it.
Hmm.
It's more real to me, but that doesn't mean that there weren't some speed bumps along the way. And
Mm-hmm.
for sure, so my kids definitely had questions, but I think the fact that they saw mom and dad were doing okay
Hmm.
probably helped immensely. If
Yeah.
we had been, like freaking out, hair on fire, or crashing out, as my kids
Yeah.
like to use the term nowadays, then things might have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so that was 2020, 2021. And then yeah, but of course my journey wasn't over at that point.
That was going to say, yeah. So once it was over, what happened next? So you did your 5 weeks.
I did my 5 weeks of recuperating. At one point, they thought that I had a blood, infection because I was spiking a fever, so they put me in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. That was like towards the tail end of that 5 weeks, and
Yeah.
and it was beautiful weather outside. It's funny because during that time after your transplant, I mean, your energy level is just in the tank.
Yeah.
And so I had like what I would call the chemo gate, people just kind of looking almost like a zombie, just kind of dragging.
Yeah.
And um I was in a pretty foul mood at times with my wife. She was
Hmm.
wanting me to eat all these healthy meals, and I'm a burger and fries kind of guy, But yeah, so then so I had a blood infection, or what they thought was a blood infection, so they put me in the hospital. And here it was, just beautiful weather. I had a view of Lake Washington out my hospital room window, and here I am stuck in the hospital. The saving grace was I could order anything from the hospital menu. So the first thing
So
that
that
I
was where the hamburger and fries came
yeah,
in.
that's right. It's kind of ironic. Here I'm a cancer patient. I've just been checked into the hospital, and they're like, yeah, sure, order what you want. But no. So that was like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I turned the corner. My energy level started, spiking back up, and
Yeah.
I think they actually let me go home a week early. So that was a real blessing. So then, 3 months later, something like that, they put me on low dose chemo to
Hmm.
kind of help. The bone marrow transplant. The goal was to drive the protein levels down so low that I think it's called minimal residual disease, something like that, where
Mhm.
if they take your blood or take a stem cell biopsy, they're not going to be able to detect any of that protein. But they didn't quite make that. It was close.
Mm.
So they put me on low dose chemo. I was on that for 3 years,
Oh,
and
wow.
I actually just they did a new type of blood test back, I think, in October, November, because the bone marrow biopsy just wasn't not it wasn't giving them a conclusive answer.
Hmm.
And I achieved MRD, so I am now off of chemo, which is
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah. So that's awesome.
So
So
but that's recent. That's within the last couple of months, it sounds
yeah,
like.
a couple of months.
I hope you enjoy this episode of our Campfires of Hope podcast. Here at Epic Experience, we make it our goal to serve the cancer community through our collective programs, such as this podcast, our week-long adventure camps, regional programs across the country, and Thrive VR, a custom virtual reality experience benefiting patients in cancer centers. If you would like to be a part of our community of supporters, please go to epicexperience.org and click Donate. Thank you for listening to Campfires of Hope, Stories of Cancer. With gratitude, Wingman, also known as Colin Farrow, Executive Director of Epic Experience. Epic Experience is a registered 501c3 organization.
You've been in survivorship mode for, I don't know how long you would consider it. But I'm guessing you weren't out of the clear, right? It's not like life went back to normal. So what was life during that time where you were kind of out of the woods, but still not?
Yeah. So I was, for that first year, I was, applying for work. I was on disability, which was very helpful indeed. Um, and so I was applying for jobs, not really getting making any sort of traction. Going back to some of the placement firms that I'd done work for, like when I'd been on contract, nothing was happening on that front. And about a year went by, close to a year and a half. I think it was like Christmas of 23. And my wife said, she's like, you know what? I think you're depressed. I'm like,
What
really?
made her say that? Like, what were the things she saw in you that caused her to come to that conclusion?
Maybe just the way I was, my manner of talking, and I'm home most of the time, and my wife she's a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
So she sees me a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think the combination of that and just my manner of speaking, my lack of energy.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I think you need to tell your oncologist about that. And that led to some, working with a social worker. That led me to meeting with some people who were, or at least one person who was, he facilitated a support group for people in my situation, maybe who were trying to get back into work, back into the workforce. And I guess that opened my eyes to, this guy in particular. I kind of explained what I was feeling, like I was damaged goods. And he said, what that's a thing. What your experience is like cancer survivorship.
Yep.
And so I attended one of the support group meetings, and a guy there, he put it rather brutally. He said, my body tried to kill me. Huh.
That's one way of looking at it.
That's one way of looking at it. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of see his point in this. And most of the other people in that group were like still in the thick of it.
Yeah.
We're still going through treatment and having a rough go of it. Me, I felt like physically, I had really, gosh, I was thankful to God. I was thankful to my wife. I was thankful to God that, I had a nurse that, they went to that level of detail with this stupid term life screening test.
Really?
My oncologist was like, they don't normally go into that level of detail
Wow.
with those things. And then my wife for being just an incredible caregiver.
Yeah.
And the doctors and nurses. I mean, I felt so well taken care of through the entire process that it had kind of made that first year kind of a breeze. I'd just go in and do what they tell me to do. And so then it's when you're free to go. And it's like, wait a minute. And back to real life.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, it was hard. So I felt depressed. And so my wife she's really active on Facebook with some of the different groups for cancer survivors. And so that's where she found out about Epic Experience.
That was my next question. So it was during this time that she found out about it. What was your initial reaction? Like, this is something I'd like to do. This is not for me. What was your
Well,
first thought?
I was like, Colorado, the outdoors. I'm like, sign me up. I mean, um, yeah, I was all over it. I didn't
Nice.
have to hesitate for a second that this was something that I would be interested in doing. And I certainly had questions, because I'm like, okay, what are a bunch of cancer survivors going to do for a week? I mean, are we all going to sit around in a circle and sing kumbaya and, get in touch with our feelings or what? And,
Yep.
maybe I think that's perhaps the quintessential response of most guys when they
Hmm.
think of a cancer survivor support group is
Yep.
something along those lines. But the fact that there was like this, the outdoors element, staying at this dude ranch in the mountains, like, yeah, I've got to check that out. So, so yeah, so
And
that
so you
was
went, when did you actually go?
well. So I was supposed to go in February of last year, but there was a scheduling conflict,
Oh,
and so the folks at Epic Experience were very gracious and saying, "Hey, you've already been approved. So we're just going to bump you to the list for this coming summer." So I went this last summer. It was just a fabulous time. I can't, yeah, it was heavenly for sure.
so what? So did you have expectations going into it? Let me pause that. I'll ask that first. Did you have anything that you were hoping to get out of it on the front side of it?
I guess for one, maybe a better understanding of the mental stuff that I was dealing with,
Hmm.
maybe a way to put that behind me.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, some of the mental stuff had to do with my cancer. And some of the stuff I think also had to do with the fact that I'd been applying for jobs. I was in my
Absolutely.
50s applying for work and not hearing back. So some of
Yeah.
it's just ageism or call it what you want, and not feeling like I'd been a contributing member to society.
Yeah.
So you kind of been put on the shelf. Yeah,
Yep.
okay, okay. We'll let you know. We'll give you a call.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, but there's certainly that the whole cancer thing that is always kind of in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
You're always a patient on some level.
Yeah.
You've got something going on, and that's kind of that can be haunting, I guess. Haunting
Yeah.
might be a little dramatic, but
It's
something like
hanging
that.
over your head for sure,
Hmm.
combined with all of the other things. So then you go to camp. You have your week there. What have you taken back from your week and incorporated it into your life now?
Well, so I would say number one, and some of the people I hung with on a day to day basis, um, cancer is just a subplot.
Mhm.
It doesn't encapsulate your whole life. Okay. And yeah, I think that was the big thing. Also, share your story. Your story
Mm.
has power. So, and it's a bit ironic, I'm a storyteller for a living, essentially. And the fact that that might be news to me is like, oh yeah, I should probably um share that with others.
Yeah.
So, and be more intentional about that. So yeah, and so since then, and and I guess a third thing would just be the fact that, yeah, we are always patients on some level, but
Yeah.
we're also survivors. Um, and for me personally, I think um, somehow God wants to use that I can use that to bring hope to other people who are going through similar
Mhm.
challenges, similar circumstances. So on that front, I was given the opportunity to share my story with a room of probably 100, 200 people from our church back
Wow.
in October, and what was really cool is as afterwards, this guy, he's probably in his 60s or 70s, he came up to me And he said, "Yeah, I'm a cancer survivor." He said, and um, I've never been able to talk about it with my wife,
Mm,
but after hearing you talk tonight, I think that it's opened the door for my wife and I to talk about kind of what my experience has been, after getting my treatment.
yeah.
So that was
Wow.
really that was really powerful.
Oh, yeah. How meaningful. I mean, I'm sure you touched the lives of more than just that one man, but you
Yeah.
made a difference in his life. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I talked to a few other people in the room who had been cancer patients, were cancer survivors, or their family members were going through it.
Yeah.
And whose kids were, when I was diagnosed, I felt like I'm only 52.
Right.
I'm too young to have cancer, but
Yeah.
that's not the case. But
No.
yeah, so my hope is, my understanding from talking to other people at camp is it's pretty typical for men. For whatever reason, we are so averse to sharing our journey and getting together to talk about it. So we prefer to, I guess, suffer in silence. And
Yeah.
and that's sad. So my
Yeah.
hope is that this will eventually lead to an opportunity to maybe, form a group where guys can support each other and really help each other through this journey,
Yeah.
because it's never over. You know that.
No, it's not. And you've been there. So obviously we don't know exactly what someone else is going through, but I don't know. I found at camp the similarities are pretty striking. No matter what kind of cancer you've had, no matter where you are in your journey, there are definitely similarities that we share, which is what forms the basis for that really strong and lasting community, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
definitely. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would share with someone listening that I haven't asked you about?
Um, that's a great question. Um, Listen to your doctors.
Hmm.
Um, they're on your side, and um, take advantage of every opportunity you can to. I mean, I learned so much more about my health through this whole experience, um, and uh, and listen to your wife or significant other. I mean, there was a time I came back from camp and thought I was fine, and then my wife went with me to my an oncology appointment like a week later. I thought I was fine emotionally
Right.
and mentally, and she raised a couple of questions, and that just about like
Hmm.
possible brain issues, kidney issues came up mainly, and that led to a whole raft of other tests. After which I learned, you're healthy, but it sent me for a loop though,
Yeah.
and I realized I'm not as emotionally and mentally stable as I think. Just the
Hmm.
slightest thing can throw you off. So seek out help when you need
Yeah.
it. Don't be in denial.
Yeah. Definitely. Thank you. That is well said and much needed for all of us to hear. Right.
Yeah.
Well, the last question I ask is the most important. Marshmallows over a campfire,
Okay.
slow and steady, or flame and crispy?
Well, definitely slow and steady, and I have a great story about that one. Several years
All
ago,
right.
we were camping with my in-laws. My mother-in-law brought a bag of those Texas-sized marshmallows. If you've seen them, I mean,
I don't think, are they huge? No, I haven't seen them.
they're like probably 3 or 4 times the
Oh,
size
wow.
of your normal marshmallow. And so I'm doing the whole slow and steady routine on the campfire. And I mean, I did a masterful job on that
If you do
marshmallows.
say you so yourself, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it was nice and golden brown. And
Yep.
I take it off the stick and bite into it. And the center of it had turned just to liquid.
Oh,
It
God.
was going everywhere. Had it all over my beard and,
Oh,
all
gosh.
over. It was so fortunately they got some pictures and video of that. So
Of
anyway,
course.
yeah. So
As
yeah,
one must.
definitely slow and steady.
I love it. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your story and how you learned that it's okay to be vulnerable and to share those things. And I like what you said too, that it's only part of your story, right? It's a subplot, to speak in story terms. So I really appreciate you being with us and sharing your whole experience.
Thank you, Gail. Thanks for the opportunity.
Until the next time we gather around the campfire, keep living beyond cancer. Thank you for listening to this episode of Campfires of Hope, Living Beyond Cancer. For more information about Epic Experience and our programs, or to donate, please visit our website at epicexperience.org. Music for this podcast is provided by Moonshiner Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us so we can share our story with more people. Also, be sure to subscribe wherever you get podcasts so you'll know when new episodes are released. We hope you come back and join us for our next episode.
Father,